don't know
Have
why.
you
Go
read
ahead.
the book Jung and Tarot? An Archetypical Journey by Sally Nichols?
Oh, yeah, sure. I
Yeah.
have it right in front of me, in fact.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was very illuminating
Yes.
because, there's a lot of decks out there, and especially new ones.
Mhm.
And, people trying to reinterpret through modern life what the tarot represents or could represent to them. And she makes at the very beginning an introduction about the difference between an allegorical type of tarot deck, which uses symbolism to further the story, but it is a story nevertheless, and it can travel across many cards,
Mhm.
versus a symbolic experience, which in itself will at that point trigger something that is unformed yet
Mhm.
in the person, and therefore allow them to explore some analogies that they would have never been able to imagine before, versus
Sure.
the allegorical is usually done with reference to what already exists, like the Grail deck, which is kind of a story of what went on during that time in the medieval
Sure.
times. So we compare it to a story that has already existed, and we using symbology plus the narrative. So that's very different from using decks that are for example, I think that the Thoth deck
Mhm.
uses more of this, even though there's numbers and letters, it uses symbology too. And the earlier decks did too. The Arthur Way
Mhm.
used the symbology in order to, like a sigil,
Mhm.
the sigil, which it puts on top layers and to then unpacked what something that could not have been unpacked unless it was done in abstract form.
Yeah, you're saying, and what are you calling their form versus the like the
Well,
Grail tarot?
yeah, this is I'm writing little essays on tarot, and I'm actually I'm writing them verbally because
Yeah.
I'm writing them also, but allegorical, I call them allegorical. And
And so
there's a
you say,
separation between allegorical decks
right.
and strictly some decks that are mystical or occult. People here, we were discussing
Okay,
about
so
that were
you're
occult.
calling the occult ones are like the Rider Waite and the Thoth and so on,
Exactly.
whereas the allegorical, okay,
The
I'm not,
allegoricals
If I'm
use
following, it's your allegorical, just
The-
it really runs one single theme, like an allegory, like the Arthurian
well,
deck.
it's like all kinds of stories and writers who write like Animal Farm, okay, that tells you the story of the pigs taking over and the whole thing. But what is telling you is something that is comparable to communism, okay, or whatever it was.
right,
So
right.
so everybody knows the
So
story behind
yes,
it. It is not a symbol from the unconscious that hasn't been formed that allows the person to have a revelation, a new revelation that they then can parallel into themselves, is not already present in the in the zeitgeist.
fair enough in some ways,
Hmm.
although it seems to me it's a bit of a distinction without a difference. I mean, I do understand very well Jung's separation of between a sign and a symbol.
Mhm.
And basically what you're saying is that
Right.
the Rider Waite and the Thoth and the Golden Dawn are all symbols, whereas a deck that is referring to the Dark Witches, for example, is only taking signs and trying to work the waterfront. But to me, what the tarot does, and helps us, the reason that I make time for this is that it helps people with their imagination. Okay. And we get so much just dropped on us in the context of movies or television programs. And so people don't have this function of imagining. Okay. And so for me now, whether it's the Rider Waite or the Dark Witches or whatever it is, they both make us imagine. By the way, Raquel has joined us, and so is Patricia, but they're both on YouTube at the moment. So hello, Raquel and Patricia. And Raquel told me earlier that she's not planning to come on the group tonight because she's not particularly feeling well, but she'll be back next week. So anyway, I'll shut up and ask others to comment on what I've said.
I follow right along with what you just said about all decks. In a sense, you're making a distinction without a difference. They're still under the umbrella of tarot. And I think actually you saying a distinction without a difference actually is a pretty wise way to put it, because that covers it. And then we can subset under that. But I think it does all roads flow back
some
up
are
to
allegorical and some are some are symbolic and some are signs, is basically the way I think about it from a Jungian perspective.
And I would actually put your statement, a distinction of difference, or distinction without a difference, and then they each have a dignity in the difference. But I would put your statement of a distinction without a difference as the figurehead of the whole family tree of tarot conceptually. I think that's a legitimate starting point.
Yeah, and you know what I'm getting at, what I'm trying to get at, and to include yesterday's session with Jerry and our readings with Jerry's book and Diane's book, is that all these things that take us out of ourselves, whether they're major religions or astrology or the tarot or tiddlywinks, if they cause us to become imaginative creatures, children have wonderful imaginations. And for example, my now quite Christian daughter, when she was 5, she wrote basically a novel, which I wish we had kept, called The Adventures of the Pencil People. And she was imagining that pencils were alive, and she was telling stories about the pencil people. And it was a wonderful way for her to develop her imagination. And so when we're talking with Colleen Kibert, or we're talking about Carl Jung, whatever it is, it's all about imagination in the end, and trying to understand our place in the chaos of the universe. And there's not one that is the right answer. And what I've tried to emphasize over years now is that, we can approach this rabbit hole from many different points of view. None of them are exactly correct, and everybody can have their position. So Gilda, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm only saying that from my lights, the issue is helping people develop their imaginal life, right? And as a roadmap for life, I hope what we're doing in this program on Monday nights is helping people have something they can meditate on, regardless of what deck it is, that they can see their life in this card. And so when we talk about one card for 2 hours, I'm trying to provide, hooks that people will see their own life in that card. And because if we do that, then we've achieved our purpose and we have better mental health, I think.
The pencil people, that's such a wonderful metaphor for the wands.
Yeah.
Because a pencil, if the pencil is a pencil, but you put it down on the paper and then it writes, and that writing makes people speak and read and sing and dance and do theater and scripts and novels. And just because this little stilo, the pencil, stilo's
out of the mouths of babes,
Yeah, exactly. That's
right.
I actually wrote down the pencil people. That's pretty powerful.
I was making those distinctions because I'm writing little essays on a book about tarot, which when someone is designing a tarot deck or looking at it, would help them also make distinctions.
Sure. Right.
It's not about being right or wrong. It's about refining and sophisticating the way of appreciating what may be in front of them.
Yeah,
that's all. It's education.
Right.
It's not
fair enough. Fair enough. And so it's all education, and that we're
spiritual
presenting
education and spiritual education. Yesterday when Jerry spoke about traditions soon being in the short future being perhaps in museums only, we found that we gave it a lot of thought because something wasn't resonating with me about that. And then we realized that a lot of these traditions have allowed people to transcend and be enlightened, but those are very few people, right? So a lot of others were not able or even came close to receiving the instruction from that tradition that allowed them to also transcend and illuminate. And that was kept secret or next to a few. So for all those thousands of years, people were living on certain dogmas, but they weren't getting the cream of the cream in order to elevate. So that still remains as a viable way of realizing spirit, because the majority has not done it, and now they're rebelling and say we need something new. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you, Gilda. Absolutely.
That for us to move on into something new without ever realizing the old that was always there, there's something and then we carry ignorance.
Yeah, but we carry it in our theologians as well. That's the problem. And when I particularly follow Paul Vanderklay as Calvinist, and he says, "Oh, I'm a Calvinist. I can't believe that." Or today, in a video that came out, I think today or yesterday, the woman that was interviewing him, Andrea with bangs is what she goes by, but Andrea used the term synchronicity, and he said it was a providence, not synchronicity, but providence. And again, I say there's a distinction without a difference, but if you have to insist on your vocabulary, then you're restricting people to only your way or the highway. And this is what has led to millions of people being killed in the last 2,000 years over matters of religion.
Well, it's more about power and less about enlightening people.
Right. And so, the question always is with any religion, whether it's Buddhism or any of the Abrahamic religions, is it about the race bowl of the monk or the minister, or is it about enlightenment? I mean, that's the ultimate question. Because, I think that from what I've seen about the Catholic Church and actually all of Christianity is that, a lot of it is about keeping the pastor fed so that he'll come and officiate at your weddings and funerals, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of strings in all of these things.
Right, sure.
But so one has
Golden
to
strings.
yes, that the cream of all these traditions, which to me, they're, for example, the cream of the Islamic would be the Sufis, the Jewish, the Kabbalists. For me, the hardest one to find was the Christians. So it's like, where are they? Where are the mystic Christians? They're very, very well hidden. Yes, very well hidden.
Right.
Those are the last ones.
It's less of them, like for the last 200 or 300 years. Like early medieval ages, you have lots of Christian mysticism with regards from being people who we now more know as philosophers, like Thomas Aquinas and people like that. But
I would say Daskalos. Do you know Daskalos? You might want to research Daskalos. He's Greek from Cyprus, and he died not very long ago. And he was like a Jesus Christ. And do we know him? Is he popular in the West? And you can just find all the research is all there. The history, he's in videos and the whole thing, and the report of all the people he would just heal a person, bring a person right into his lap, and he would bang, whatever it was, even if they had not walked all their lives or whatever it was, and he could do that. And that's a modern Western person.
Yeah, and there's a good example in the 20th century is Krishnamurti. And Krishnamurti got conned into, well, I don't know if he conned into believing, but he got conned into presenting the persona of the new Messiah by the Theosophists, Annie Besant and those people. And they sent him to Oxford and trained him and educated him extremely well. And then 23 years later, 23 years after he was discovered, but they were hyping him all along, they had a meeting of the Theosophists on his birthday, his 33rd birthday, and they were going to announce him as the new Messiah. And he got up, and this happened in the Netherlands, and it was in about around 1933 or 32, something like that. And he got up and said, I'm not anybody's Messiah. I don't want anybody to follow me. Don't follow me because I am not the Messiah. And by saying that, he couldn't get back to a private life. He ended up basically becoming, at that point, he became the Messiah, whether he liked it or not, for some people. And he wrote lots of books, and right up until his death, he gave lots of lectures and things.
A similar story is Aurobindo is a similar story. They
Outer
thought he
Ring.
was Aurobindo from Pondicherry.
Oh, Aurobindo, yeah.
Yeah, Aurobindo. They thought he was going to be the next Buddha or whatever. And,
Yeah.
I mean, he had the powers. That's no doubt about it at the end.
Well, he could,
But
and
that's not what he was doing.
right, and he created a wonderful ashram. I think we've talked about his ashram that you and I have both attended.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing place, honestly.
So these healers could heal on sight by just looking at you. So then we wonder when yesterday in the talk was about, no, the God now is science. It is science. It's in our biological and it's science. And we're wondering if we're going to make science the next God. So then we again were going to suffer the same ending.
Because science is all logos. It's not where life is.
Exactly.
You know, that's the point I keep repeating. But
and those people were not proficient in science, and they could heal and had this amazing. It's just amazing. It's a miracle. You might want to look up Daskalos, and you will be amazed.
I think scientists claim that they are only logical. Actually, in the history of science, when you have these great innovators, they often quite often they actually are pretty close to a belief into God. Like Einstein is a good example.
They have faith.
Actually,
they have faith. There are many that have faith.
Right.
And
I actually got that lying around. Haven't read it yet. Einstein wrote actually a piece on cosmic religion, which basically was I think it's I wanted to research if he knew Jung actually, because it's a little bit maybe familiar concepts in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, science is an aspect, invaluable.
Yeah.
But when we as a society then jump on a hook or a boogie wagon to call it, to say, well, now is the next kind of God is all about this, then people call it. I used to write with a person for a local paper in New York City, and he was an old German Jewish, Paul Steiner, and he used to tell me, the word doc, doctor, it's about a healer or somebody who you go to get healed, and it's been used so much. Everybody's a doctor in philosophy, doctor in this, doctor in that. That the word doctor no longer had any connection to what it was really about, because it's so language sometimes just kind of disturbs belief systems or connectivities, and sometimes they're positive and others.
So sometimes they're the ladder on which we can get toward enlightenment, and sometimes they're the impediment.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the point, isn't it? And so, when I look at Christianity now and look at the claim by the fundamentalists now, who say that the Bible is correct, 100% correct, I say, yes, it is. And the same is true of the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and many other spiritual books.
It's more like a both and not only this. It's a both
right.
And how, something new
and
arises.
So that's what we have in the Tarot. So let's pull it back to the topic for tonight. I'm always happy to talk about religion, but on Tarot night, I'd like to get some Tarot work done too. So maybe we can continue the conversation as we present the Tarot cards that we want to talk about tonight.
Tammy's warming her deck up.
Okay. Tammy, what are you going to draw? Tell me what's the card you draw for tonight? Can you hear me?
Okay, so I drew from the Dark Goddess Nemesis, the Two of Air, the Two of Swords. I'm always drawing swords. And then this is just from a really neat deck about wildflowers, or called Wildflowers, and it's just let your gentleness be evident to all. So I'll be real nice tonight.
Okay.
While I juggle my swords.
My
thoughts.
While you serve as our nemesis?
Serve as your what?
Yeah. As our nemesis?
I'll try not.
No, you're not, Dre, but it's a warning to us that we have to be careful about what we're doing here. And so I'm going to share the cards for tonight, and this is them. for the openers anyway. So what we're looking at is 4 cards which represent the Knight or Prince of Cups. And on the upper left, we have the Golden Dawn Tarot. And
which Golden Dawn Tarot is that one? There's a blue box, there's a green one, and there's another one. Is that the one by
I have no clue.
two artists, an occultist and an artist? Or we were wondering which
Yeah,
one
this
that was.
is, let's see if well, it's the one that was done by the
This is 3
the
different
Order of the
ones.
Adetum, Israel Regardi and Robert Wang.
Okay, right. And there's just one by Israel Regardi, and then there's that one and then that one.
Yeah, so this is the one that was painted by Robert Wang
Okay.
in the 70s or something like that, 60s or 70s. And it's based on Regardi's earlier work, perhaps.
Right. That's that other deck.
Right. And the one on the right is Aleister Crowley's deck,
Right.
which is called the Thoth Tarot.
Mm-hmm.
The one on the lower left is the Rider-Waite Smith deck, which was painted by Pamela Smith. It was promoted by, I think, Arthur Waite, and Rider is the publisher, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And the Marseille deck is one of the oldest decks. If it's not the oldest, I guess it isn't, but it can be traced back, I think, 600 years. Jordan, is that right? For the
1542, 1547, yeah, I think is what ish. So yeah, right around between late 500 and early 600 years.
Like the Visconti decks, and they're all around that time, right?
Yeah, supposedly the Visconti deck predates the Marseille, but
that's what I thought.
But the reason I chose this is because Robert Wang's book about the Kabbalistic Tarot chooses these 4 decks for his discussion. So so his book called The Kabbalistic Tarot, he talks about these 4 decks right through, and so that's why I selected these for our opener. So
which are very symbolic also.
Righto. So let's go around the room, and first, before we get too detailed into those cards, let us first give our cut on what the Prince of Cups or the Knight of Cups is about. And so, Jordan, why don't you go ahead? You're the...
Sure. To me, Knight of Cups is really about contained emotions, very dynamic, on the move. There's that turtle aspect of a knight where he has to carry his whole house on the journey, so to speak. It's being self-sufficient. He's not a beginner. He's actually very just pre-king, as it were. Whether he's in the royal bloodline or not, he's in that place. So, for example, look at the knights around the round table. Is, I think, the operative metaphor to me as to his place of peace and power. And so I would say Knight of Cups being dynamic emotions contained with the regal quality, very refined, on the move. So in action. It's not something that's kept quiet. It would be very much, rather than emotional outburst, it would be intense emotional connection. In short.
Okay. Gilda, you want to go?
I always like to connect it to the one before. And the one before would be the page, which went on exploring without boundaries, as much as they he or she could encounter. And I see the Knight as in many very powerful Buddhists, they ride an animal. They're riding an animal. So the Knight rides in most decks a horse or an animal. So that means that he's now using his psychic and the intellect that he brings and pairing it with his active eros, animal, being, or human force in order to effectuate the next move.
Right. Okay. Tammy, do you want to talk about this? No. Lisa, do you want to talk about it?
I'm actually getting ready for a road trip.
Okay. Ghetto, do you want to talk about the Knight of Cups?
Not just right now.
Okay.
Comments right now.
Yeah. Annabelle, you're up. Do you want to talk about it?
I'll say something because for me, this class is all about the synchronicity that happens. Each Monday, there's been something in life. And the big thing this week, of course, I mean, for many people, was the funeral of Prince Philip, the death and funeral of Prince Philip, and how it impacts so much. So it's about the monarchy. I mean, you know, and I'm talking both about the cards and about the real life, right? And the
About
thing.
all of us.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So, for example, this afternoon, I had a conversation with my daughter about democracy. What does it mean? How we don't have it in America because of the way it was founded, and how the contrast at the moment, particularly, is with England. We are the lost colony, right? That just, you know, wandered off and decided we'll do it for ourselves without a king, without a queen, right? And there's England sitting over there, and there's Queen Elizabeth, and she picked him as her consort. So things about Elizabeth and Philip, one thing is the horses. And I was really glad that Gilda just now spoke about the horse on this card, because that's one of the first thing that jumps out to me. And also as a child, my mother was raised on Army bases. She was an Army brat, born in the Philippines, raised a lot in Hawaii, many other places. She always was riding horses. She came and gave birth to me on Henry Street in Brooklyn. And she said, no, we are not of that class. We don't ride horses. The family, my birth family, right? And what she was talking about was my grandmother from Arlington, Virginia, who was the greatest expert on the monarchy of anyone I've ever met. And she could name, you tell her a year, right? 1437. She'll tell you who was the king, or the, you know, well, it was king then, and who their parents were, and how they got to be king, and what was going on, and who was the next king. It was all about lineage. So that, I think I've said enough. How this card just completely is making sense to me right now. And it's interesting that we don't have the king, but we wouldn't have the king because Philip wasn't king. And we don't have the queen because this moment right now is not entirely about Elizabeth. We're all feeling, oh, poor Elizabeth sitting in that pew and all right, hunched over. But really, it's this moment about a kind of knight and his horses, and they loved their horses. Philip with his carriages and guiding the horses, Elizabeth with her riding the horses. I mean, they also loved their dogs, which I think probably relates to this monarchical, aristocratic, what we're talking about, the court cards. And then their gardens. So their gardens and their dogs and their horses, and I see it in this card.
Okay, great. So Raquel says, the Knight of Cups is coming of love, but the love only comes when we are ready. So it's more about being ready to feel a certain type of love than to just receive this love from outside. Interesting point. Blake, did you have any comment? I guess not. Okay.
I just want to add that writing the arrows and writing the psyche at the same time, to me, is perhaps a deeper meaning that can be added to the night. That it is both together, going for it,
Right.
not yet knowing where it's going to end.
Right.
And then the next level, it would be, if we take the queen, then that turns into a recipient that already has the experience of meeting the arrows with the psyche, intelligence, and which the dive began with the page. So
yeah. Yeah, from my perspective, the pages and the princes or the knights are about, adolescence, okay, and just maybe arriving at the point where one becomes a knight, because in the times that people did become knights, they became knights probably by 20, if not before, and they might be dead by 25, right? And so, but it refers to youthful love that is passionate and that sort of stuff, but it's not mature. It's not the aged wine type of love. and so I think of that. I think of all princes and knights in that sort of a context, but I did ride horseback in the old days. Annabelle, I took lessons for 8 years, including in Japan, from the horse master of the first cavalry, who had been a Japanese cavalry officer during the war. And after the war, he went to work for the U.S. Army, training snotty little kids how to ride. And I actually got up to the point where I was fairly confident, but I was sneezing my head off all the time, all the 8 years that I took lessons. And it was only after I was 25 that I realized I'm allergic to horses. Definitely allergic to horses. So that was not my path, but it was my sister's path, and she did a lot with horses over her whole lifetime and still does, or is still talking about it. And she's going to have her 70th birthday next Sunday, but she's still talking about having a riding ring to train kids. And the women who took riding lessons with me in Japan are still communicating with me every day. and they have little girls in there, or at least one little girl in their grandchildren level that is still right in the midst of it. But anyway, it's women often fall in love with horses, and so they probably always fell in love with knights too. Knights who came on horses.
Yeah. So I think also whether it might not be the seat of some maturity, it is certainly the seat of the highest energy that, concentrated, ready to engage during the trajectory of life, wherever you want to place it. That energy carries the highest potential.
Yeah. Mother Nature is imperious, as Edward Edinger used to say, which means that you're going to end up getting married or having children or something. And Lisa, you have your hand up. Lisa?
Yes, I was thinking about the knight in shining armor. And a little girl's emotional attachment to that idea.
Mhm.
Yeah, and there is no knight that's going to come and save us. He does not exist.
Well,
Although-
but that instinct is in men though, because I always end up being finding damsels in distress.
Aha, interesting.
And
Really?
yeah, and even to this day, I have found damsels in distress who need my help in one way or another, and and you know, have done, and they've
Energy.
huh? I mean, there's nothing patently sexual about it, in the sense that I only meet these young women through the computer, right? So it's immaculate damsel in distress, but nonetheless, it happens. So that's archetypal too, Gilda.
But there's a shadow side to that too.
Oh, sure, there's a shadow side to that, and that's where young men go to bars and pick up girls who are hurting for some reason, and the girl goes along with them, and you know, whether it's good to have free sex or not, I have an open mind about that. It so happens that I came up in the last class of the Victorian era, and so in my college class, I don't think that there was much, you know, free sex, but it came into our culture right after I graduated from college, and so anyway, I'm not sure it's a good thing, because I think it's caused us lots of heartache also, and caused us lots of broken marriages. And
It's the both and,
Both
because it
and.
was contained, ready to explode,
Right,
burn
right.
those bras.
Yep.
You know, let's see.
Right.
I entered right in the middle of it.
Yep. Mother Nature is imperious. Right.
So a lot of things developed from that.
Oh yeah.
No.
And you know, I don't kiss and tell, so I'm not going to tell
Which
I'm
are
not going to
beautiful.
tell my stories other than to point you at my novel. Second, this is just in my eyes.
You know, on the subject of the night's effect on the young woman, that I forget the way it was worded just a little, 5 minutes ago. That just makes me think of the knight in Alice Through the Looking Glass, who is by far my favorite knight of all. And if you don't mind me reading just a tiny bit from that,
Sure.
Before he recites the most incredible, one of the most important poems in the English language, in my opinion, which is Sitting on the Gate, the Aged Man. Right before that, it's, Lewis Carroll says, of all the strange things that Alice saw in her journey through the looking glass, this was the one that she always remembered most clearly. Years afterwards, she could bring the whole scene back again, as if it had been only yesterday, the mild blue eyes and kindly smile of the night, the setting sun gleaming through his hair and shining on his armor in a blaze of light that quite dazzled her, the horse quietly moving about with the reins hanging loose on his neck, cropping the grass at her feet and the black shadows of the forest behind. All this she took in like a picture, as with one hand shading her eyes, she leaned against a tree, watching the strange pair, which is horse and knight, and listening in a half dream to the melancholy music of the song. I mean, if that isn't falling in love, if that isn't a young woman who just completely abandons herself to this, he's described as foolish and everything else, and everything that's his own invention. I think it's very typical of this tangent that we just went into about knights and young girls.
Well, and it's not only young knights that get in trouble too. At one point, I wrote 50 poems on the topic of seduction under my pen name, which is David Garrettson. It's actually published under my pen name, but I'll share with you a couple of cherries so that you see what I'm talking about. All right, so here's, and I will recite them. They each take up 1 minute to recite, so you'll like it. Okay, symphony. I want to play you like a symphony. Draw a rosin bow across your silken breast with driving rhythms from the timpani. I'll guide you far from life's cacophony to hidden valleys, Mozart's sweet bequest. I want to play you like a symphony. Molten cello will conjure sylvan sea before brass cymbals bring the waves to crest with driving rhythms from the timpani. Oboes kiss the brass with breath so gently that woodwinds whisper lovers' firm request. I want to play you like a symphony. Until our tension passes middle C, just one crescendo frees life's hurts redressed with driving rhythms from the timpani. Warm string vibrations guide infinity across our honeysuckle minds abreast. I want to play you like a symphony with driving rhythms from the timpani. So that became a bit of a métier for me in the form of the villanelle. And so there's Symphony's Reply also. So
Beautiful.
Unless somebody screams, I'll
That's really good. I'd love to hear the response too. I love the way you cadenced in and then came and brought the timpani and the symphony together at the end.
Yeah. So this is Symphony's Reply. Conduct me firmly like a symphony. Draw heart to breast through fluid rosin bow with driving rhythms from the timpani. Guide spirits far from life's cacophony. At meadow's edge, I'll be a supple doe. Conduct me firmly like a symphony. Baton away the bitter cresting sea. From sultry cellos, molten rivers flow with driving rhythms from the timpani. You steal my breath with one flute melody. Warm fabric of a piece your woodwinds sew. Conduct me firmly like a symphony. Strings tantalize my mind with ecstasy. Your beat upon my heart guides me to grow with driving rhythms from the timpani. Your spirit in the music pulls me free to smash bright cymbals, letting bodies glow. Conduct me firmly like a symphony with driving rhythms from the timpani. So.
No wonder
Nice
you had
pair.
no problems getting wives.
Oh,
Well, let's say I'm not good at kiss and tell, but any young man that would like to impress a young woman could go and buy my book, which is called Seduction for the Soul, I believe is the name of it. It's available on Amazon as a Kindle only. And the author is David Garrettson, which is my pen name. But anyway, so 1993, I was already 47, and I was certainly the knight gallant at that time, and so I was moved to write 50 poems like that, but I didn't publish them in my own name because I wanted to protect my reputation.
So is the night gallant the dark night?
Yeah, probably. We can certainly talk about the dark side of
Are some of your poems
Skip.conover,
dark?
but pardon?
Because that one wasn't dark at all, in my estimation.
Oh, but some of them are. Yeah, some of them are, and some of them are quite raunchy. But I'll leave that for people's own exploration. So Jordan, you had your hand up. What do you want to say?
Yeah, when you mentioned earlier that the night, it wasn't a mature love, so more the infatuative, and then moving towards up in the middle ground, I would say the troubadour, as Joseph Campbell has expressed it. And then Raquel then brought in the love that's going to come when you're ready. And so I would say what's interesting is the shadow side, or actually the place where there's only a one-sided reaction between two people would be infatuation. But then if there's a reaction between two people that then become lovers and fall in love, both, then that infatuation is not temporary and juvenile. It's then limerence, which is just that first honeymoon phase of an actual long-term love affair. And so I really like the synchronicity of how everyone around the room going through the horses and falling in love with horses. And then maybe that's why knights rode horses, because they noticed that the girls fell in love with horses. But then we go from, you mentioned the immature love, the juvenile piece, so infatuation, limerence as a middle ground bridge that starts but begins to move towards love. And then, as then Raquel said, the higher octave love, which then that's moving into the higher chord, the higher part of the chord. So I really just like the way the conversation has been running the synchronicity gamut between everybody having those today.
Let's put it this way. Those two women that took writing lessons with me in Japan between 1962 and 64 are still communicating with me today. And why is that? Well, they've both been married twice, I think, and I've been married twice. But they've still come back to me, and we have a lot of fun in text messages back and forth, and so we have a certain love for one another. I'm sure that's true, but it doesn't mean that we want to hop into bed with one another. And so that's a more mature love today. I mean, if we had been free in the 60s and 62, let's say, to follow our passions, we probably would have gotten in pretty serious trouble. I mean, one of these women, well, there's a story about the two women. Okay, I took writing lessons with the two, but I never saw one of them. Okay, I never really realized she was physically there on the bus with me. Okay, but she was interested in me. And so the other woman, one fine day in May of 1962, said, well, this other woman, who will remain unnamed, is really interested in you, and she wants to meet you at the teen club and spend some time with you. And I said, well, okay, let's schedule a time. And she said, no, it has to be today because she's leaving Japan tomorrow. and so we met at the teen club for 1 hour in 1962 May. Okay, then I didn't see her again until 2005. Okay, but a little bit earlier than that, maybe 2003, she was emailing me because we had connected up our high school class, which was difficult because we'd all gone to the winds after graduation. And she had been emailing me, and I said, wait a minute, I remember this incident where I met this girl at the teen club, 40 years ago. And she says, yep, that was me. And so here we were exchanging things. And then I had a art show in Greenwich Village, believe it or not. And she was living in California, but she persuaded her husband to come with her to New York to see my art exhibit in 2005, which was quite a hoot. And he died shortly after, unfortunately. Well, actually, he didn't die because of that, but he, shortly after I met him, was the tsunami in Sumatra, and he took an assignment aboard the American hospital ship that went out to help people, and as the veterinarian for the ship. So he was helping the animals that had been involved in the tsunami. But unfortunately, he then died another year or two later. So anyway, today we have a mature love, and we communicate every day. I was communicating with them right before I came online. So that, there is, there's still juice in these old bones, even at my age.
It's a sort of friendship that is well-grounded.
Yes, I think that's true.
And there's love in friendship.
Surely.
Well, and then you have a lot of life, and isn't the object to die young, as old as possible?
Yeah,
so you still got the life moving.
That's the best idea, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually this is a kind of a Cups quote. The Turkish proverb, "A heart in love with beauty never grows old." That fits, I think.
Right. Okay, so now we can do some formal work here. And
Do you mind if I say one more thing?
yeah, go ahead. No, I don't mind.
It has to do with astrology because it's timely. It doesn't fit into the, well, it might fit into the looking glass, or anyways. So for the past several days, the planetary energy of Mars is considered out of bounds. It's beyond the Tropic of Cancer. So that energy is like, it's a rogue energy, and it's in the sign of Gemini. So if you find your mind is moving at a more rapid pace, that could be why.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
That's really actually a good point, because with it out of bounds, it personally in my chart it's at 23 Gemini. I think that's where it is in the big picture 2-ish. But what's interesting is I would suggest then look at your chart and see how it's aspected. Is it trined, sextiled, or standalone? Because that fast mind is really like it has zero resistance astrologically right now. So I'm
Well,
glad
it's at
Lisa, you
20
brought that up.
It's at 27 Gemini, and it is, hold on.
Yeah, I guess
It's
last Monday it was 23. So yeah, I haven't written it.
It's trying to Jupiter, which expands that energy, and Jupiter is in Aquarius. So,
And yeah, and the trine with Venus and Juno, and then the South Node in Libra.
I feel the Aries intensity. It is so intense. My Mars is in Aries and my Moon is in Gemini. And it's just, there's this intensity. I keep thinking, well, usually it arrives during the spring for me, but it's really very strong. And then I'm equating it with what's going on and the pandemic and everything else. That is, it's really, there's this intensified field.
When that Jupiter's in Aquarius. And so I'm really glad you brought that up, Lisa, because it's a very nightly trine with Jupiter in Aquarius, Mars in Gemini, and then Venus and the South Node in Juno, all conjunct in Libra.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
no, I don't think what you're stating is correct, because Venus is conjunct the Sun in Taurus. Venus, Mercury is 1 degree Taurus, Venus is at 6 degrees Taurus, and Uranus is at 10 degrees Taurus.
No, you're absolutely correct. I'm looking at, honestly, I look at this, I'm looking at my trine in my chart and the way this piece is working. So actually that would not apply to anybody else. So I appreciate you clarified that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Raquel makes a good point here. By the way, you're right, Lisa, that my mind is racing these days because I just have too many things on it. But I wanted to point out Raquel's point here. She said, I just realized something as Annabelle was reciting. The strange couple, horse and man, can be an allusion to centaurs or Chiron himself in the tarot cards, I mean. So comments on that?
Yeah, definitely the marriage of the beast and the divine.
Yeah.
And that's a centaur. No saddle, no bridle. I mean, none required.
Yeah. And Raquel
Is that like
said,
Beauty and the Beast?
Well, and the most
It
obvious
is.
one.
It is, but in one person. So you get not the duality, but the integration of the masculine and the feminine, the figure in the ground,
the writer and the written.
right, and then also the mind and the nature. So you get eros and logos and all of it. But in the centaur, it's simply whether it's a male or female centaur, the divine human body with a higher mind, then that seats in the saddle of the beast, basically, in the four-legged horse part of the body. So that's Raquel bringing that up is a wonderful allusion, ALLUSION allusion.
yeah, she says also Mercury is combust as well. Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
My thought just flew out the back door. I'm sorry.
Mine came in through the front door.
Okay, so what I was going to say is that the higher mind can sometimes fall into the cracks due to gravity. It has the gravity effect, taking that higher mind and bringing it down to the bestiality mode, if that makes any sense.
You're indicating that then the higher mind not devolves, but it can then travel down to connect. You're saying with the beast?
What I'm saying is, to achieve that level of the higher mind, it takes a lot of work and dedication and focus and intensity.
Yep.
Where when we become complacent
Mhm.
We just assume we're going to always have that higher mind.
That's a
And
great point.
gravity takes effect.
Well, in Jung's quote of "for a tree to reach to heaven, its roots must grow to hell." I mean, that's there from your higher mind to the lower piece too.
I
That's really-
understand
So-
that.
Yeah.
I
Go
was
ahead,
I
reading a
Gilda.
understand that.
Gilda, go ahead.
I was reading a short story, and it's really fabulous. I forget who, in the literary club, and it was amazing. And the man thought and dreamed and thought he experienced being a horse. And one thing that I found that was really quite lucid and interesting and pertinent to the night is that the animal was telling him, at least I have 4 legs to stand on. You only have 2. So
Yeah.
that's also, instead of thinking him a beast, right? The
Mm.
animal is a helpful, is part of what allows everything else to become. So it's standing on the 4, and plus the human on top adds but the human is on 2 and the animal is on 4. So the animal has a lot better balance close to earth.
Well, you make a nature illusion there. I mean, because then that's the higher mind and the human, the body, growing out of capital N nature. So the horse is the ground for the figure of the human life to evolve and grow from. So it connects us to nature.
It's interesting that
It has
both
4 pillars, 4 legs. That's 4 pillars. So it's actually quite complete in his circumference, in his base circumference is steady.
yeah.
It's not
So-
3 legs, it's 4 legs.
Yeah, it's interesting that Israel Regardie and Aleister Crowley both went to birds instead of horses as the driving force. And, that may have something to do with, spirit moving across. It's not all bestial per se. The question is, I always wondered why, what did beauty see in the beast, right? and what's Beauty and the Beast about? And it's basically about that point. And she had to learn to love her animal side. And when she did, he became a prince, right? So
What Gilda said also made me think about dimensionality: 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions.
sure.
And that's because it was just during this week, and as some of you know, I had some eye operations during the last 6 months, and it was a very long time before I realized that I was seeing 2 dimensions instead of 3 dimensions. I was driving and I realized it looked like a postcard, and then I realized if it looks like a postcard, I'm not actually seeing the dimensions. I'm only seeing it flat. And the way, Gilda, you spoke just now about the 4 legs, it's kind of like we don't know what we don't know until we find out that we don't know it. And that's what I'm saying about the dimensions. I went for months without realizing that my problem with stepping off a curb was that I wasn't seeing it in 3 dimensions, because all I knew was I'm walking, right? So even our memory of how things used to look, and really, I'm speaking of looking literally, but I'm also speaking of it metaphorically. And I think that's what the horse is sort of metaphorical, and the fact that it gets translated into something that's flying makes sense to me. Flying horses, right? The flying A, right? The classic, what gas station was that with the flying horse?
Chevron.
All the, right.
The
all
nightmares.
we know all about the
Nightmares.
flying horses. I mean, that's Same, connected. So anyway, I think it's about dimensions.
Pegasus.
And it's always
It was
cursed
mobile oil.
It's also Pegasus.
Right?
Pegasus.
Exactly. Pegasus.
and Sleipnir from the Norse.
Yeah.
It might be pronounced Sleipnir, but I like Sleipnir better. So he was powerful.
Okay, I'm going to share these cards again, and I just want to read one official passage, and I'm reading from Tarot and the Tree of Life by Isabel Rado Kliegman, and she uses the card that's in the lower left corner, which is the Rider-Waite card, to discuss the Knight of Cups. We move next to the Knight of Cups, who gets my vote as the most romantic court card. Again, look at the body language, how straight he sits in his saddle. He sets the highest standard for himself. Only his best will do. Look at the gracious arch of his horse's neck, pure glistening white in the sun. This is the Grail Knight, the knight in search of the cup from which Jesus drank at the Last Supper, and which caught his blood when his side was pierced at the crucifixion. On the knight's armor and helmet are the wings of Mercury, the messenger god. He's moving at a walk. Why? Because when you're doing your life's work, when you're seeking your holy grail, when you're finding your dream, you don't have to hurry up and get it over with so you can get on with something more important. The water in this card is a gentle, slow-moving stream. The knight setting out on his journey already knows that you can't push the river, that the stream will swell in its own time to become the river of his life. When you are going at God's speed, there's no urgency, no rush. What is important is to do the best you possibly can. This is a cups card, a feeling card. The knight pursues his venture with his whole heart. The fish, a curiosity for the page, examined at a distance, has now become a part of the knight's armor and a part of himself. He integrates the stuff of his unconscious into his ego. His self has begun to emerge. He will need the wisdom and power of the fish bring him from their oceanic depths. There is a mountain, steep and treacherous, that the knight may have to scale as he follows his destined path. This is everybody's knight in shining armor. He's setting out in the world to make things right. The Knight of Pentacles and the Knight of Cups have certain similarities. They'll both bring you flowers. The difference is that the Knight of Cups will bring you flowers because you are so beautiful. The Knight of Pentacles will bring you flowers because they are so beautiful. The problem with the Knight of Cups is that he's just too good to be true. He will surely break your heart, either because you discover that he has clay feet or because there's no way you can live up to his expectations. No one can be as unflawed as he seems to be or manifest the perfection he's looking for. Beware of a light so pure claims to cast no shadow. Sooner or later, you or he will betray humanity his image belies. A petty observation, a selfish motive, an impatient response, a cruel or vengeful delight. The disillusionment can even be triggered by clumsiness on the dance floor, inelegant table manners, or an occasional poor complexion. Still, this is fundamentally a most appealing knight. His quest for a sweeter world in which ideals are revered as the motivating force of action requires all the creative dynamic energy Beria can provide. I don't know who Beria is, but anyway, it's kind of a nice write up comments?
Is that from the book by Robert Wang?
No, this is from the book by Isabel Ratto Kligman. It's called Tarot and the Tree of Life, Finding Everyday Wisdom in the Minor Arcana.
I thought that one of the interesting symbols, which I had not paid too much attention to, is in the page, the fish coming out of the cup and the water and the wave in his hat. It's like a wave of water meeting the fish. So, that the wavy potential of the psyche. Whereas here, his helmet now has wings. So he's coupling already. He already has passed through some emotional maturity to a certain extent. And now he's got the intellect meeting and going forward to make a realization between the two.
And his feet have wings
He knows
too.
it because he's got wings on his helmet.
Also, maybe just awareness. I think I got a little bit about the night today, and I think I can understand why they moved away, like why in the Golden Dawn Tarot they moved away from the horse and basically moved the symbology totally to the winged head. They basically took that and made it the bird, I think, because I think maybe they thought it doesn't translate that well anymore, and they wanted to put more emphasis on the development consciousness or the mind, not so much the thing with growing up, because you have this. I thought about this a little bit earlier, like what meant the night when tarot was invented, and it meant when you had a horse and were a knight, you were actually able to affect the world in feudalism. Like if you didn't have that, you were a peasant and you couldn't really do anything. So the horse then stands for, okay, now I'm able to affect the world. And I think in the Golden Dawn card and in the Thoth card, this is more shifted toward, okay, but we're talking about developing the consciousness, not growing up. Growing up is the kid stuff, like.
Right.
Yeah. I think
Yes,
I think that there's a very, very interesting comment that Lisa makes, which is winged feet and winged helmet does represent Hermes Mercury. And honestly, I never saw them before, but sure enough, there's a winged helmet and winged feet. And so it does represent bringing something up from the unconscious, and maybe that something is
I mean, and one
love,
part of that, one.
Hermes also had a relationship with the god of the underworld.
Yeah, so it's bringing something up from the unconscious, and that something that it's bringing up is emotion of the viewer. Okay, in other words, it's causing the person that's looking at this night to say, "Oh, wow." Right?
I think maybe you have these like two processes, like outside, like if I become a knight and get a horse and stuff like that, I encounter struggle, or I have to go to the desert and find my quest. Or in medieval literature, you basically only had one template, which is kill the dragon, template 1, or meet the Dark Knight, who's the arch enemy. But in the stories, of course, it always means the own shadow self in a way. It's never an outside person in the interpretation.
Right.
So I'm wondering, is there a caduceus in the card at all? Do you see one?
I don't see one, but let's look here. I'll put it back on the screen.
Not in the Rider Waite, but you do have the snake in the Golden Dawn and the Thoth.
Yeah.
And then the Thoth also has the snake, more looks like rope coming there. But that's a good question about the caduceus, because then that's a primary difference too between the top two and the bottom two, Lisa. that goes with the bird versus the horse.
And it's not just the emotion, because Mercury was a trickster and a magician. No, I'm supposed to be packing.
Well, you're packing really good information here is what you're doing for
Good.
us.
I'm glad. That's great. So I'll have to look at, I'm going to take those cards with me, and if something flows, I'll let you know.
Okay, good idea. Okay, I'm gonna
Can I
read
say
about.
something?
I'm gonna read
I
about
get a,
the.
can I say something?
Yeah,
I get a
sorry, go
sense
ahead.
that that each card from the next, there's some kind of transformation that takes place. And so by the time the knight is carrying, already he's carrying still the cup, but there's no fish entertaining him. He's now entertaining flight, matching intelligence with emotion. So he's more secure, and that's why he presents so desirable, because he's not busy diving into the unconscious. He's or just intellect, and the horse puts him on the ground. So I think those older cards are related to, are actually more complete, because they use the four-legged horse to be grounded, whereas the top two are flights into the next dimension of evolution, spiritual evolution, where one is not so rooted in the physical.
Good
I
point.
think that it might represent, be representative of the Virgo, because Virgo is mutable earth and is ruled by Mercury, and also Gemini, because Gemini is mutable air ruled by Mercury. So it integrates both the intellect and the physical body using discernment.
Yeah,
If
and
that-
Tammy makes this great comment. She says he's not just looking at his phone for likes on his Facebook page. Yeah, that's very good.
I like to be relevant for today.
Yeah, sure.
And that certainly is.
Yeah, that's the point. You know, the ingenue young man who gets gobsmacked by a beautiful young woman can't go around spending his time staring at a cell phone. He's got to pay attention to what she needs. Yeah. If she's going to pay any attention to him at all. I mean, it works to communicate, but after you communicate, then something more has to happen, right? I didn't hear you, Gilda. You muted yourself. No, don't have. Okay. All right. I want to bring it back up, and this time we're going to focus on the Thoth deck because I have Aleister Crowley's comment on this card. Okay, so this is the upper right card. The Knight of Cups represents the fiery part of water, the swift, passionate attack of rain and springs, more intimately, water's power of solution. He rules the heavens from the 21st degree of Aquarius to the 20th degree of Pisces. He is clothed in black armor, furnished with bright wings, which, together with the leaping attitude of his white charger, indicates that he represents the most active aspect of water. In his right hand, he bears a cup from which issues a crab. A crab. Okay. The cardinal sign of water for aggressiveness. His totem is the peacock, for one of the stigmata of water in its most active form is brilliance. There is here also some reference to the phenomena of fluorescence. The characteristics of the person signified by this card are nevertheless mostly passive in accordance with the zodiacal attribution. He is graceful, dilettante, with the qualities of Venus or a weak Jupiter. He is amiable in a passive way. He is quick to respond to attraction and easily becomes enthusiastic under such stimulus, but he is not very enduring. He is exceedingly sensitive to external influence, but with no material depth in his character. When the card is ill-dignified, he is sensual, idle, and untruthful. Yet with all of this, he possesses an innocence and purity, which are the essence of his nature. But he is, on the whole, so superficial that it is hard to reach this depth. His name is writ in water. In the She King, or in the Yi King, the fiery part of water is represented by the 54th hexagram, Kwei Mei. The commentary is singularly obscure and somewhat sinister. It deals with the difficulties of rightly mating such opposites as fire and water. Compare the Queen of Wands, but in that case, water is the calming and modulating influence, while here it is fire which creates trouble. Swiftness and violence ill suit a character naturally placid. It is rare indeed to meet with a person who has succeeded in harmonizing these conflicting elements. He tends to mismanage all his affairs, and unless sheer good fortune attend him, his whole career will be an unbroken record of failure and disaster. Often his mental civil war ends in schizophrenia or melancholy madness. The abuse of stimulants and narcotics may precipitate the catastrophe. Where have we seen that before?
Which book is that? Who wrote that?
This is the Book of Thoth
By?
Aleister Crowley, who
Oh, because
did
I
the
have a
Thoth
few.
deck.
Maybe Lisa or Raquel can speak to, I just noticed something in the Thoth I hadn't seen before, that he is sitting on a very large astrological symbol of a node. Basically the squiggle top curve, like a double Leo.
Can I see the card?
Any thoughts? Yeah, the Thoth. If you look at what you get this shape. If you would, Skip, please zoom in if you would.
Well, the north node. The north node.
Yeah,
so,
and that's, yeah. So could you speak to that?
So right now, the north node is in Gemini. The south node is in Sagittarius. It's a transit that one works towards in their lifetime. And it takes work. And it could be the dharma of the chart rather than the karma. It's something that I'm kind of looking more into right now. But it's the north node of the moon, as opposed to the south node of the moon. But it's, yeah.
No, thank you.
What I want to know
when you
is,
mentioned the drugs, when I looked at this card, I saw a Neptunian aspect, and then you mentioned drugs, and then it made sense to me.
I want to know where the crab is.
I was looking for the same thing. I can't find. He has like an upside down lotus.
No, he said the crab was coming out of the cup, but I see a snake.
Yeah, that's a snake, right?
I don't see a crab. But in any case.
So this this represents more of a scorpion. Oh, that's what it is. It's a scorpion.
Where's the
Because,
scorpion?
well, the Scorpio has different levels of being. So the lower octave is a scorpion and it's a stinger. And as you go up the octaves, you can reach the level of the phoenix or the eagle.
That makes a lot of sense too, because this eagle, let's
it's
call
about
it
transformation.
This eagle's about to dive deep. I mean, the reins are, it's going straight down into the water, into the ocean, into the depths, but it hasn't gone yet. So it's like that Neptune quality is a very strong one you brought up there, with the way this eagle is aimed, right at the water.
And Scorpio is about transformation.
Mhm.
Right. So would you attribute some Plutonic or some Pluto with that Scorpio?
Pluto is the modern day or secondary ruler of Scorpio.
Right. Okay,
Mars,
yeah.
Mars is the traditional ruler.
Okay.
It
Very
kind
good.
of looked like the water was already displaced
Mhm.
before the bird got there, like a helicopter displaces, or
Yeah,
you
it was
can see.
opening for.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
as if it was opening in advance. Yeah, I noticed that too. I hadn't seen it before, where it's opening in advance of its entry, as if its presence is causing Moses.
Yes.
It's parting its own water, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
That's what I thought.
I have two different books for that deck.
Mhm.
Here's one. And this one is by Gerd Zeigler. It's an old book. And there's another one by Ankon Aho here.
Mhm.
And they make different references. This one by Gerd Zeigler says, the central task of the Prince of Cups is to master dealing with emotional needs. Air, in the context of water, symbolizes strong passions, as does the astrological sign of Scorpio. The Prince's coach, reminiscence of a seashell, is drawn by a scorpion eagle. This can be seen as an allusion to the possibility of transformation. The coach drives over the water of emotions, but never touches it. Wishes and desires must be perceived and recognized. They are fundamental driving forces in our lives. It is only possible to use and master them if you are wide awake and alert. Instead of suppressing them, you can use them in the process of becoming more aware. When seen this way, they are a vehicle that helps us journey into the world within. The snake, which is what I see in the cup, I don't see a crab. The snake, symbol of change and wisdom, awakens and rises up. The eagle on the prince's helmet hints at the possibilities of spiritual liberation. The realization of these possibilities is a task which still lies before him. All too engrossed in looking at the snake, he forgets the lotus blossom, love, which now points downward. As he learns to integrate the driving forces of desire, the lotus will be able to develop and grow upright again.
Okay.
So,
Strong passage.
yeah, so there we can make reference to the actual symbols. The lotus, which is hardly seen, and the snakes coming out of the cup. And where's the lotus? Do we see
What book
lotus?
did you read that from, Hilda?
Here's the lotus here.
This is-
Right,
probably.
that's the lotus in his hand,
Oh, in his hand. Okay.
upside
From
down.
Gerd Zeigler Tarot, Mirror of the Soul. It's called Mirror of the Soul. It is highly recommended in many places. And let's see, this printing is for 1992, and it was published in 1988.
Okay, would you hold them up again, Gilda, so that we can see the two books? Okay.
This one is by Gerd Zeigler, and
Okay.
you can find that it's highly recommended.
Mhm.
And
I think I have that one.
this one is by Akron Aho Ben Zaf.
Mhm. Okay. The Crowley Tarot. Okay.
Right, and you have yet another version. So
Yes, I do.
that's
I really resonate with the air and the water.
Well,
the
I
double
have the
focus.
version that was written by Crowley himself, but never mind.
Oh, so yeah,
That's
that's good.
That's what I was reading from.
So what is the name of that one?
Well, it's called the Book of Thoth, I think. Yeah,
Okay, that is the Book of Thoth.
the
Okay,
Book of Thoth. Oops, there you go.
all right. So
By Aleister Crowley.
okay, yeah, that is definitely
That's from the horse's mouth.
yes.
Right.
Okay, so what I would like to do now is read what Wang has to say. It's brief, but he has an overview of the princes, which is worth reading first. So first I'll be reading Robert Wang's overview of the princes, which is contained in the Kabbalistic Tarot, a textbook of mystical philosophy by Robert Wang. And Eva Ryder calls this her Bible, for what it's worth. So here's what he says about the princes. These princes are seated in chariots and thus borne forward. They represent the vowel forces of the name in each suit. The mighty son of the king and the queen, who realizes the influences of both scales of force. A prince, the son of the king and queen, yet a prince of princes and a king of kings. An emperor whose effect is at once rapid, though not so swift as that of the king, and enduring, though not as steadfast as that of a queen. It is therefore symbolized by a figure born in a chariot and clothed with armor. Yet is his power illusionary unless set in motion by his father and mother. The princes are very complex cards in that they are wholly activated by the king and queen. As the text suggests, they have no motive power of their own, being pulled along in their chariots. But from the standpoint of the enlightened tarot, these cards are all important. First, it will be seen that the lion, eagle, man, archfairies here, and bull are the four cherubim. And he's talking about all four decks here. So let me share my screen again and show you all four decks. So pull out of the Thoth deck for a moment. So he's talking about all four of these decks. First, it will be seen that the lion, eagle, man, archfairies here, and bull are the four cherubim. These are very ancient symbols of the elements attached to many different religions. They appear among the gods of the Assyrians. They are the four animals in the Old Testament vision of Ezekiel. They are the four symbols of the Christian evangelists. They are the rulers of the four elements of the Kabbalah. In Kether are the primordial elements, which become the united rulers of the elements in Tifereth. and which are individually expressed in Malkuth. Princes are the personified forces, kings, of those elements brought into perfect balance in Tifereth. If the cards are set out in a row, wands, cups, swords, pentacles, the golden light of spirit may be imagined as permeating the four and directing the cherubim to pull the chariots. These are the most refined aspects of the personality. They are the elemental kings in ourselves. As such, the princes may be taken in any direction by the divine will. The energy of the Prince of Wands may be applied with justice or with cruelty. The unconscious flow of the Prince of Cups may be subtle and artistic, or it may be very evil. The mental activities of the Prince of Swords, ideas may be creative or destructive. The material qualities of the Prince of Pentacles may cause growth for good or evil. The princes may provide a point of entry for true understanding of the tarot as a tool of enlightenment. And here the utility of the princesses may also become clear, for they are the grounding of the lessons of the princes in our material plane. It will now be appreciated why the princes in a divination often represent the coming and going of an event or person, and the princesses often represent approval or disapproval of a matter. And then specifically about the Prince of Cups is the air of water, specific air of primal water. Here again, the Golden Dawn version is the inspiration for that of Crowley, both emphasizing the water lotus and the serpent issuing from a cup. Wherever the serpent appears, it is generally a reference to Chokmah, the divine wisdom, the Yod force. Here it has the fiery, menacing qualities of Scorpio. The cup held by the prince is hay and encloses the Yod serpent. As vow, the prince carries out the activities of the Yod and hay combined. Here is water. The chariot itself is pulled across the water by an eagle, water symbol among the four cherubic emblems. At another level, the suggestion is that the calm appearance of the water may hold violent and fiery energies, like sulfuric acid, which appears entirely benign until it has something upon which to act. Water symbolizes the personal, group, or universal unconscious, which bears dynamic energies. Okay, that's it. Comments?
Can you tell us again which are the four animals? Lion and
Lion, eagle, I think it's
Bull
bull and
and human.
a human, yeah.
oh,
So that book you just read from it's the Kabbalistic Tarot by Robert Wang.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's correct. Here's what it
The water
looks
the water that you described is very scorpionic.
like. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the depth of Scorpio. Scorpio has so much facility with the unconscious, the shadow, and with depths.
Oh God, I can't show these things. I don't
No,
You
know.
can
have
always pick out
its
its
background.
intensity.
you have to take the background away, yeah. Oh, with a Q. Mhm.
So, is it from a Kabbalah standpoint? Kabbalah with a K is Jewish, and Kabbalah with a C is Christian, and Kabbalah with a Q is mystic or Hermetic. Is that
Yeah,
Hermetic?
yeah.
The Q is the Golden Dawn, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, Q is used by the Golden Dawn, but it's the Hermetic Q of the Kabbalah.
And also on Star Trek.
We had
He's the
never,
trickster. He's the trickster on Star Trek.
Yeah.
we had never considered that upside down a lotus flower, because
Mhm.
all the chakras are identified as upside down lotuses, and when they are pierced, then they turn around and face up. So in this point, in this night, it's showing that he's still on his way, carrying it, but he hasn't yet pierced it in order to evolve and move on to the next.
Well, there's a gardening metaphor there too.
Mhm.
Like when he
Yeah.
mentioned the lotus going down, soon to return. I remember in my garden in Denver, because it was kind of cross climate zone. My dahlias, I would take them out of the ground towards winter and hang them upside down in the cellar, so they're not, getting full on cold. And then in the spring, I'd put them back in the ground and they come right back up. And I hadn't thought
Wow.
about that with this card though, with that resurrection and then becoming the phoenix.
Yeah.
As because Lisa mentioning the phoenix in the Scorpio piece at the higher octave. That makes a lot of sense with that lotus flower.
Yeah. Getter says, got to read up so much still on Kabbalah and astrology, not only for Tarot. The symbolisms are kind of everywhere in art, and I concur. I have the same problem. I came at all of this via the Tarot, so it's the one I know the most about, but I really fall down on the Kabbalah and the astrology, which I almost know nothing about.
Skip, I think you should look for a professional sponsorship from Jeff Bezos and Amazon, because you keep my cart full. It's like, he should pay you some money.
I don't want to do that, Jordan,
No,
because
I'm just kidding.
Because my work is done without real pay. I mean, some people do make contributions to what I do, but it's overall it's a negative cash flow situation, and so I'm not seeking to make money on people.
Well, no, and I get it's a labor of love. I was just making a joke.
Yeah.
You should at least make an offer, give you a
Amazon,
jacket.
They do a associates thing. So whenever you reference something that's out on Amazon and add a link, then you actually get a percentage of that, but it's a pittance. It's like pennies. And I know that just because I used to edit for a magazine that did that. And then she would show like the whole income for the month was like $22 from Amazon.
Yeah,
From
with
tons and tons of links.
Yeah, with 13,500 followers on YouTube, my income is about a little bit more than $50 a month. And so you have to have millions of followers before it's really a financial operation. And it's a shame because YouTube doesn't disclose that easily until you actually experience it. And so to experience it, you have to get 1,000 followers and 240,000 minutes, 4,000 hours in a year. If you achieve that level, that's 1,000 followers and 4,000 hours of video.
Of viewing? Of people viewing you, or of your
people
output?
Viewing your output, people viewing your output. That's what it takes to be monetized on YouTube. And so I achieved that a couple of years ago. And nowadays I get 4,000 hours every 6 weeks, but it's still almost nothing. And I just remember the poor young woman from San Diego, I think, who in the old days, people who were making music thought that they could use YouTube as a funding supply, and YouTube wasn't saying, except they were making 3-minute videos, which is pretty hard to add up to 4,000 hours of 3-minute videos, right? And so she went up to Santa Barbara one fine day and started to shoot people in YouTube when they changed the rules and made it so that they would only monetize if you had those numbers, and destroyed her life, I'm sure, as a result of that. But in any case, a warning to all people on YouTube: you're not going to make money on YouTube. You have to use YouTube as a way to do other things that you want to achieve in your life.
Well, I'm glad you brought that story up about her, because that's a really good story that represents the shadow side, or the darker side, of this Knight of Cups, or Prince of Cups, where she flipped. Because I mean, as I put it, I think in the chat, that there's a dual focus, the air and the water, and that's higher octave, but then, and more Poseidon. But then the Neptunian piece in the lower octave, when it switches, say, drugs, a dual focus is then double vision.
Okay,
I was surprised that they mentioned the drug scene at all. So since Skip mentioned it was from Aleister Crowley himself, which indulged in such experimentation, then it clicked.
Yeah, well, Wang was involved in some of that also. And, this is why I'm emphatic that you do not need drugs in order to become enlightened or to have a numinous experience. You're much wiser to be vigilant and watch for the numinous experiences, because they happen to me all the time, except I know what to look for. And so if you know what to look for, then you will have lots of numinous experiences, and then you will be.
The breath also is one of those keys. Move
Yeah,
that Kundalini.
Yep.
Whoa.
Kundalini works, and meditation works, but it's not just meditation for the sake of sitting there on a zabuton, thinking or not thinking. It's meditation so that you free your mind to tell you things. Okay, so your subconscious will tell you things, in the same sense that it will send you a dream or a vision. All those things are, as Jerry said yesterday, all dreams are numinous. Right? They're all messages from our unconscious. And, if we look at January 6th, that's a vision. That was a vision from the collective unconscious of America, that we have serious work to do in our country, and to gain maturity back. If we talk about the greatest generation, which was the World War II generation, all of those people had trauma and very deep experiences. So they came back and made a peaceful society, largely in the 1950s, and they sort of created a better world. But then as young people come along, they're all wild animals again, and they don't have that experience. And so the messages don't get through as clearly as they did in the greatest generation. And then you have to get your numina elsewhere. I'm
Mhm.
sure plenty of people who served in World War II had numinous experiences, and even people that were growing up in that time certainly did. I mean, my mother-in-law was born on December 7th, so it was her 11th birthday. Pearl Harbor was her 11th
Yeah.
birthday, and I can assure
Wow.
you that was a numinous experience, and it was so numinous that my wife was born on August the 9th. Her daughter was born on August the 9th, which is Nagasaki Day, the last bombing of World War II. And so, at least for Americans, obviously the British were involved before for a couple of years. And there is a new movie called 6 Minutes to Midnight, and it's a little hokey. It does have Judi Dench in it, but unfortunately, it's a poor. We watched it last night, and it's a poor use of Judi Dench's talents. So that's my cut on that.
Gilda made a pun mid show about nightmares, but it was the Dark Knight of, if you go KNIGHT space MARE, the horse. So there's the nightmare or the night horse. So that's the nightmare would be the dark horse that rides in at night.
Yeah.
Well, it comes from there's a whole literature on somewhere in like England, in that northern area. There were cults that venerated the horse and the women, and so then the story goes that at night they would, when they would sleep, they would travel. The mayor would travel looking for, action. So, and and so people were afraid that, a visitation or something. So that's kind of like where the nightmare, because why is a night horse, nightmare is reference to a female horse.
This whole night has just been full of correlations. Like, I think more so, I feel it more so than usual. There's just been like lots of sparking off each other.
Well, that has been the beauty of it, and people seem to like it. So I guess
Mars is out of bounds in Gemini.
what's that?
That's what
like Annabelle said. I mean, I
Mars.
think Annabelle's kind of our leader in the pack. Last year it was like every week it's almost, I didn't know if your life was tracking ours or if your life was driving ours.
That was me and Raquel, though. I have to say, Raquel also was having just as many synchronicities, and they were exactly weekly.
Rhythmically, it was insane. And I mean, it was every week. I'm like, this is good because it's all happening good. But I look at the cards and go, okay, what's the highest octave of this card? Let's pour some good energy in for Annabelle and Raquel.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just finishing up some little chit chat on the YouTube channel, but I want to thank everyone for a wonderful evening, and I'm glad it worked. And I'm going to call it to a halt because I have to stop doing 5-hour sessions.
I have to say, I really resonate with you calling the 2-hour time, because it's like a reading that runs long. You just need to sell a session package. You can't say it all in an hour. So we have to kind of parse it out week by week.
And we have to know that there are an infinite number of possibilities in terms of looking at tarot decks and books about tarot, and you name it. I'm trying to offer a generic something that's in enough depth to attract people's interest to it, because I do believe in it as a tool for spiritual enlightenment and as a tool for understanding one's own life and what's happening in one's own life. And so, but I don't think we have to say everything that ever was said about the tarot, that, you know, because everybody can now go away and spend a lifetime, you know, unfolding the Knight of Cups, for example. So
or they can sleep on it. They can sleep on
Yeah,
it.
we could, yeah, and steep like tea. I mean, because tonight was a very Knight of Cups, the synchronicities and the passions and the platonic love kind of, I really felt tonight rather than we were just talking. I mean, we all have a great dynamic, but tonight was just, it's a jewel. I mean, it's, I think, Tammy, you're right. It just stood out as so much the way we're sparking off of each other.
Right.
So we all need time to dream.
Right.
And Skip
so next week we'll continue with this quartet, but with the queens and possibly the kings. It would be great if we could get through both of them so that we can ultimately get to the Starman and the She-Wolf. But
Skip,
yes,
I emailed you a couple of different decks that I have of the night. Yeah.
Okay, terrific. That'll be useful. And so next week we'll take a crack at the queens and maybe the kings and see where we get. But we're taking our time on it because, I mean, we were taking 2 hours or more for all the major arcana, and I have no objection to taking 2 hours on the minor arcana cards, each one of them. But let's see how far we get with the queens next week.
Yeah, I like the 2 hours. I think it regulated itself to, it felt like we found balance at 2 hours. Because there was that one night when I think it was 5 hours long or something where we just kept going, and then we'd say goodbye. Oh, but wait. And it's like, it's like a 4 hour, 3 hour goodbye.
Yeah. So I'm going to end this session now, and thank you very much. It's 10:03, and we'll just do that if we keep going. So good night, everyone. Peace.
Thank you all.